How many here have seen my presentation on printers? So we got one, and Jason's seen the very first one that we actually did of this. So this whole project started clear back in, oh gosh, probably 2008. I first started doing pen testing 7 years ago. And one of the things that I had an interest for this when I went to work for the pen test team is, are you guys looking at multifunction printing devices, multifunction devices? The answer is no, they're just printers, Daryl. And this is from a pen test team. So within about 3 months we worked with them, I enlightened them on why. Printers are a key security risk for corporations. So hopefully we're going to share some of this with you today. So again, my name is Daryl Highland. My handle on Twitter is %X. I'm a senior security consultant for Rapid7. That's a picture of my dining room. My wife helped me unload that from the truck. That thing weighs 2.5 times more than my wife. Okay, she helped me unload that from a pickup truck. Luckily, I didn't kill her. I didn't get maimed myself. And that thing weighs like 250 bucks or 250 pounds. I hauled it in from Columbus. Should have had the picture up here. There's a warehouse in Columbus. It's like when you go into it, it's just printers as far as the eyes can see. It's pretty wild. It's like an actor's dream come true for this type of stuff. I've been in IT for over 20 years, and then, like I said, I've been doing consulting, pen testing for right around 7, maybe a little more than 7 years. So what are we going to talk about? Obviously, multifunction printers. We're going to look at a few attack examples, and this is just a few attack samples. The list goes on and on and on of what we're able to possibly do. We're going to try to do a few demos, and I see that no one has a laptop up running it here, so I feel safe doing my demos because I've had to put devices on the internet so we can do it live because you can't fit a 250-pound printer in the backseat of my car. It just doesn't work, so I couldn't bring it up here. We're going to talk about some automated attacks. We tried to automate some of this stuff 2 different ways. I have a tool called Preda that I wrote. That's very useful, in my opinion, for pen testers to do auditing when they're on assessments, and it'll pick up a number of devices, not all of them, but a number of them. But we're in the process of also migrating a lot of those modules over to Metasploit. So we've done a lot of that. And then also, I actually have a reverse shell attack using firmware attack against high-end Xerox devices, which we weaponized in Metasploit, which I'm going to demo here also. That's the goal. So, and I made videos in case everything goes to hell in a handbasket. So why multifunction printers? What is it that all pen testers want? Besides helping the customer and being nice, own the box. You want creds. You want to pwn the box, and creds will lead to shell. Gives us the ability to gain access to resources. So a number of times printers can give us the value, the ability to gain a foothold into critical Active Directory environments typically. And if they don't give us domain admin, as was talked about a minute ago here, they give us an Active Directory CAD that gives us the ability to move lateral within the environment so we can escalate rights to a domain admin level, if that's what you're looking for. So a couple of interesting things. Like I said, we started this in 2011. And it's kind of interesting. We were able to gain access in 2010, about 10 or 15% of the time during engagement, we were able to gain access to credentials that gave us a foothold into Active Directory. So we jump forward to 2014. That has changed to 45 to 50% of the time. I go into a corporation 40 to 50% of the time. Without ever touching anything other than multifunction printers, I'm able to gain Active Directory credentials to give me a foothold into their Windows environment. And out of those, we get a little over 5% of the time, we get domain admin access from the multifunction printer. So we're going to discuss some of those type of things. So again, why multifunction printers? How is this possible? We can pull usage tracking data, scan the email. In fact, here's if you go to, this one happens to be from an HP printer. If we walk up to an HP printer, I think this is like a 6040 or some higher level version of that. If you look right here, email, Send your document as an attachment to an email. Well, how's the multifunction printer capable of doing that? Normally it has credentials so it can log on to the Exchange environment, Windows Exchange environment. And then over here, scan and store a job. So where do you think it's storing the job? A lot of times that storage happens to be a file server in your Active Directory Windows environment. So literally a user walks up to this device, puts a scan job in there, he enters one of these buttons, he maybe asks for a PIN. So he enters his PIN, the PIN is associated to him. The system does LDAP lookup, so we have LDAP to validate that user if he's legitimate. And then what it does is it turns around and it saves the data out to a file server or sends it to email. So it needs to log on to a file server or it needs to log on to the Exchange server in some cases. A number of times it's allowed just anonymous email access to send stuff, but not always. A number of times those are set up. So we have that scan to email, scan to file capability, and LDAP authentication. And this exists in about 50% of the companies that we engage, which brings about an interesting concept. So you go buy a multifunction printer. They start at around 6 to 8 grand and go up from there, upwards of 20 or 30 grand. So you get a figure, 30% of the companies out there are spending upwards of 10 to 12 grand so they can just print. I mean, it's a horrid waste of resources. I'm a big fan of you buy a multifunction printer and you lease one, use it to all of its advantages. Use these functions here. Because you can configure these devices to be secure if you know the device and understand how to secure them. But 50% of the people are wasting money. They can buy a better printer for that kind of money that they just want to print. And 50% of the people are actually not configuring them properly from a security standpoint. So then we get to a couple of questions. How many people here have jobs? This is pretty straightforward. Okay, so we all have jobs. I want everyone to be honest. In the place you work, do they have printers? How many places have printers? Everyone has printers. And you may not know the answer to the next question, but if you do, let me know. How many people or how many companies, your company in specific, when you deploy a printer into the environment, you are required to change the default creds to something other than the defaults before it's deployed. Okay. So any of those companies back there per se have Ricoh printers? Anyone have Ricoh printers? Any of them have Xerox printers? Okay, so we have Xerox printers in here. Well, the first one on the Ricoh printer is kind of interesting. So if you go onto a Ricoh printer, and Dan was the one that told me about this one. If you go to a Ricoh printer, you change the default password, which you do, I do encounter once in a while. Turns out there's a second account on there. There's actually a backdoor account on the system. It's called Supervisor. The purpose of the Supervisor account is to actually change the admin password for the admin account. Okay. And if you log on as admin on the device and look at the accounts that are on the system, there's no Supervisor account listed. I was actually on a bulletin board for Ricoh support people, and they were talking about this, and they said, hey, yeah, you know, you can log on with Ricoh or with Supervisor and change the admin password, but don't tell the customer this. What they don't know won't hurt them. I mean, seriously? Oh, come on. I actually used that one time during an engagement. I was on an engagement where everything was locked down, literally. It was the third day of the engagement, and I had gained no access to anything on the person, nothing seriously on the network. So I knew the Ricohs were there, and I knew they had passwords set on them. So my final day there, I changed the password to the default on the device. I logged on, was able to pull creds out of it through the LDAP configuration, which we're going to talk about here on how to do that. And I was able to get domain admin access. And to top it all off, the guy who set the printer up was that typical guy in your company that's always unhappy, really disgruntled, just pissed at life. His default, his password that he used for his domain admin that he set on the printer was eat shit and die. So it made a really fascinating report. So looking at pulling data, what kind of data can we get from devices? We get usernames. If we're looking at just low-level stuff, usernames, application information, we can get host name information. So there's good information just from the most basic printers can be pulled. And a couple examples of that is like Dell. It gives up usernames, application, and client data. Xerox does the same thing. HP does the same. And let's take a look at it. So we look at this real quick. This is the usage logs. A lot of printers have usage logs for chargeback purposes, especially if they're higher end. When you go to do a print job on any of these printers that do this, it logs your information. It actually logs your active, it's kind of hard to see on the screen, but it actually logs your Active Directory name that you're logged on to your machine as. So we have that, which we can use for brute forcing. It also tells us the host name that it came from, and it also tells us the application associated with this. This is all driven by the drivers that are installed on your machine. I got error pictures. Okay, same thing here. We're able to get the actual applications. So maybe some useful information, may not be. We can also get the user IDs, again, on the Xerox devices. And again, on the HPs, we find the same data. And this is all generated from usage logs. So we can quickly extract usage log data that may be of some value during an assessment if you're in a case where you can't get anything usable. We do encounter those once in a while, but not a whole lot. So as we're going through this presentation, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Don't be shy. Jump right into the conversation. It kind of makes it fun. I don't really care whether I get through all these slides. The ultimate goal is you guys learn something, have a little fun, and don't stare at me like that. Okay, so extracting data from an address book. So we're going to lead up to a demo here. Hopefully it all goes good. We're going to start off with, I'm only going to talk about the Konica. Now what I'm talking about will also apply to other printer brands. In this case here, we can get usernames, username information, email address information from Konica devices, fairly simple, from the web interface. But it turns out to get passwords, which is what we want, that are configured on the device, that data has to be pulled in another way. It turns out that passwords are not accessible via the web console on the Konica printers, but they are accessible using a management tool known as some PageScope utilities. PageScope utilities interact with the multifunction printer using SOAP messaging transactions. And it does it over TCP port 50,001, which is non-SSL, and 50,003, which is SSL. Fairly straightforward. So what we did was we fire up their tools. I like their tools. We download one of their PageScope tools, and we monitor its transaction to see what it's doing. In this case here, we pass the default creds to the device with a SOAP message admin, and the default password on most of the Konicas is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It actually responds back, which was known as an off key. The off key is needed to do all SOAP transaction requests against the device. You validate it, and it's kind of like the session token. Okay, pretty straightforward. So then we go ahead and we pass the request back. We have to get the versions right because based on patch levels, you get different XML version levels. So you've got to make sure those are right if you're going to carry out an automated attack. And you pass the off key back to the thing, and instantly it will actually give us back data. So here we can see send mode. We can see that at host name, we can get the username, and we can get the password in plain text and the folder that this SMB process has access to. This would be a scan to scan the folder functionality. We're able to get the plain text passwords. Any questions? Okay. Well, we like to automate this stuff. I'm lazy, so trying to manually do all this SOAP stuff bites. So, but we can get SMTP, SMB, FTP. So we've set it up to automate with SMB, FTP, and of course, we got that data. So let's go ahead and try the demo. Let's see if this works. So we've written the Metasploit modules, and this module I'm getting ready to display just came out like a week ago. I finished getting it through the pull request process just a little over a week ago. And they made me do some really things I didn't want to do, which was a pain in the butt, which took so long to make me rewrite stuff that made me the only person that wrote a Metasploit module using SOAP messaging to actually build the SOAP message with Nokia gear. No one else has done that. So Not sure why they did that to me, but that was my pitch. Let's move on. Of course, I didn't write the IP address down. So everyone's going to have to ignore if they see something they shouldn't see. Everyone close your eyes. I don't remember what the IP address is on the machine, so. Get to see all. What's that? Get it all. Everyone taking pictures. Get to see all my research folders and all my. And this happens to be a C554, so the default password is a little different on this device. Five, six, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they made it more complex so people can't remember it. Yeah, default passwords are, why bother? You know, really, why even bother? You know, as if we didn't know there was like Google out there. Google all the passwords. I think that's right. Let's go ahead and run it and see what kind of damage we can do. Version check connection failed. Apparently, let's see. Let's see if I can. I know what's wrong. Let me give myself an IP address. It usually does make things just a tad easier. Sometimes. So it walks through there and it actually strips out all the passwords. I happen to have 2 SMB configured in there. That's the username. Of course, I gave really important username. Password in plain text, and the host you can actually connect to. And also with the new Metasploit design, all this data is ported out into a separate database called CREDS. So we quickly, you have that data available, so now you can use other modules to carry out attacks using those passwords in the environment. So it's kind of cool. Everyone like that? Simple, you don't have to know SOAP, runs pretty good. We also have this module in Preda. So if you want to run Preda, I've written a module to automate this against every brand of device, or large number of devices of the Konica Minolta. So it works pretty good. And it takes into consideration changing SOAP versions and all that stuff. And it also takes into consideration the different default passwords for a couple different models. And of course, if you find a new model that isn't listed in my list, just add it to the list, the data list file in Preda. The structure is really easy to understand and see what happens. If it works and it's a new model, send me an email and we'll publish that out into the product. Because I only publish stuff out there once I've validated a particular model. And this is if you don't want to just scan your entire environment. Okay, the passback attack. This is the most critical, most important, most critical attack vector, in my opinion, that exists in multifunction printers. It's a fairly simple concept. You don't need tools to do it. Matter of fact, we've only automated a couple of these because sometimes they require altering the printer configuration stuff. But generally, it's fairly simple to do. It's always successful. Think of it that way. So what is a passback? So we target printer authentication services, LDAP, FTP, SMB, and the concept is to get the printer to send the data to you. That's the passback concept. And SMTP configuration. So this is how the concept works. So you have an LDAP server that exists on a corporate network. And you have a big printer. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's HP, Xerox, Ricoh, Canons, doesn't matter. And then you have you. You're the evil laughing skull. What a quiet group. Come on, smile, laugh, say something, throw shit at me. I don't care. Do something. Let's make this a little more lively. Jason promised me he was going to heckle me. He said
I've been there, but you haven't heard me, but trust me, back here is mine.
Okay. You need to lift it up a little bit. So this is real simple attack. How does the printer work? Well, it works real easy. It does LDAP off to the LDAP server and authenticates, right? And then it sends the LDAP reply back. Pretty straightforward, simple. What we're going to do is we're just going to change the damn IP address of the printer to point to us. So when it does an LDAP lookup, you capture the data in plain text. It's that simple. And you can set it up just using Netcat. It's easy enough. There we go. Kind of a slow phone, but it was there. So we're going to look at a couple screenshots to start with. So we have Xerox. We come down here to LDAP config. You change the IP addresses. You have this printer password function. Interesting story with this. Okay, when I did this presentation, first released the printer attacks, the attack vector here was a lot different. It used to be you would just go to the printer, you would go to the configuration page, and you would go click View Source, and you would see the LDAP password. This is how it was. Well, I talked about that at ShmooCon and basically made about a half dozen vendors look like asses. And immediately they came out with this fix. The fix was the password is no longer on the page. Everything else is. The bad thing is I can change anything on the page without altering the password. So now, even though the password's in the background, I can change the page to do anything I wanted to do with that password. So in reality, okay, I have to click at 3 other things. You're killing me. Come on. To get your passwords, I don't have to just look at the source. But still, it's how difficult is this? It's a simple attack vector, and it works really good. Really good. I love it. So moving over here to this color cube, when you walk over, once you change the configurations to point to you, there's under user mapping, you can see this, under user mapping is basically an LDAP lookup tool. So you can actually kick off an LDAP lookup. A number of printers, Sharp, Ricohs, on the previous page have a test button. So you don't actually have to change the configuration setting and save it. Xerox, you have to save it and then do the lookup and then capture the data. Pretty straightforward. But in the case with the Sharps and the Ricohs, there's a test button so you can test your configuration. So I don't change the password, I just change the IP, I go to test, and it sends me the password in plain text. So those ones are pretty easy. And this function should work on HPs, but I have not had enough face time with an HP, or experience with HPs. Seems like no one ever configures an HP. It's like, you know, it's a $12,000 HP, and they treat it like it's that piece of junk sitting on the desk. They use none of the functions and features. That's what I've been encountering. Anyone have the big HPs in here? Do you guys consider it actually do anything useful?
Your junk, it seems like they're always losing their mind and all that, all defaults.
I like that. That's kind of cool. Because all defaults is default passwords. A number of printers have that problem. A number of printers, if you do firmware upgrades on them, or patch firmware upgrades, they seem to preset the password back to default. So, which isn't really a smart idea, but each their own. So what we do is we set up netcat, we do the passback attack, and we capture everything in plain text. Oh, that phone was faster. I like that. Now we have a demo, so we'll see how the demo goes. This demo has two pieces. The two pieces of this demo, we're going to do a passback attack where we just capture everything with netcat. I think the printer's already configured, so I don't have to change the IP addresses on it, but we'll see. But what happens if you come to a Xerox and they've changed the default passwords? So what's the default password for a Xerox? No printer manufacturers use passwords. That's stupid.
Probably
1111. Okay, so the default password for Xerox is 1111. So let's see if I can get my mouse here because I'm lost without a mouse. Okay, so to start with, let's I'll pick that one down. Cancel. So here we have a Xerox printer, and as you can see, it's up and running. So my wife turned this on for me today. This is on the internet. I do ask you, you are going to see IP addresses pointing to this device. I ask that you don't screw with it. Just be kind to me. It's a device I use for research and stuff, and I don't want to have to rebuild it. But it is exposed to the internet, so you are going to get enough information to own me right now. Or own my printer. There's nothing on my network. I got it all shut down. I'm not totally stupid. A little slow at times, but not totally slow.
How much paper you got in that bag?
There's not much paper in it. There's probably 10 pieces of paper. You know, yeah, I'm not stupid. You know, my wife's sitting there, and I'm thinking, this is a hacker conference. This is going to be like goatee coming off this thing. But so if we come over here, and hopefully you can see the whole printer. Your screen kind of brought me down a little bit here. Let's shrink this down a little bit so we can see it properly. Okay, that looks better. So here you would log on. So if we go to log on to this, we go admin, and then the password should be 1111. That's the default for most Xerox workcentrics. And you can see it fails out. We don't know what the password is. Well, I got a solution for that. So use Ox together Xerox password extract. Okay, so what we have here, what we set up here is I discovered a firmware flaw, and we're going to discuss it a little further down the road. But this firmware flaw gives me the ability to basically send a package to the printer port and have it execute code at root level privileges. Probably not a good thing. And, more likely, everyone in the room back there that had Xerox, unless it's a Xerox that you've updated the firmware to in the last month, it's vulnerable to this. Maybe not this attack, but it's vulnerable to a very similar attack. So, start with, now you're going to get the information, like I said, please don't screw with my printer. If you're going to screw with my printer, at least have enough decency to wait until my demo is done. So anytime you're doing a firmware attack on the device and you're using these tools that I'm releasing, if it doesn't work the first time, wait 5 or 10 minutes because you're actually dumping firmware packages on there. There's no data in the firmware package, but you have to let it go through the processing and kill cycles if it fails to initiate properly. The goal here with this one here is to be able to get the actual passwords. Let's see if it works. There's a 45-second wait time on this. What this attack does is it dumps a firmware package on the device. It executes a piece of code, and it scrapes the password out of a file. And I set it up to write that password to the root of the directory of the system. So if this fails, and you go to the URL on the device, you can go look for, I think it's called Prada.txt, and if this file shows up, the whole process failed. If you just rerun it, it'll clean it up. That's the way it's designed. But it waits 45 seconds, and then it queries for that file. And of course, if that file's not there, it fails. But if it queries the file and the file's there, then it runs another module that cleans it all up. And as you can see, we have the password. At least somebody applauded. So now we can go admin. And now we're logged onto the device. From here, we go to properties. We go to connectivity, protocols, LDAP, do a passback attack. We can see there's one configured. In this case here, I actually have it already set up. So typically what you would do is you would go to edit. You would change this IP address right here, and then you would save it. You would apply it. And then after you apply it, you come over to user mapping. Here, if we fire up netcat, that's 444. Target device. We do an LDAP lookup, search. And voila, we've got the Active Directory domain, Active Directory username, and Active Directory password in plain text. Now we kill this before you hack me. Any questions? Does everyone understand that? You're being nice to the printer. Go printer. Please tell me your secrets. And what to do, it gives them to you. The only thing you need to know how to do is change an IP address and run netcat. And if you can do those two things, you can get the printer to do what you want. Typically with the SMB stuff, it varies on how the authentication takes place, but SMB is typically going to go to NT, NTLM, NTLM2, those type of things. Most of the printers I've seen are doing NTLM, so you can catch the smaller hash handshake, which is easier to crack. You do the same thing. You can fire up basically netcat and capture that handshake. It's going to be a bunch of junk you're going to have to filter through. Or you can fire up an SMB listener within Metasploit and then have it connect back to you via the SMB and capture those handshakes, which you can feed into a cracker. In those cases, you don't typically get plain text. But a number of these settings on these devices, you can go in and actually change the type. Remember, if you're actually come across a printer, some of the things you also need to look at before you do this attack is make sure that the LDAP is set up for non-encrypted. You can capture an encrypted handshake. If you can read it, man, you're better man than me. It looks like garbage to me, and it always will be. But you can easily change it to plain text. Okay, so a lot of the settings you can change to different types of authentication types and capture that data.
And the multifunction through Kerberos yet?
Yeah, I've seen Kerberos on this, but yeah. So yeah, if you can do something with the Kerberos in some cases, go for it. I can't remember what I've seen listed under the LDAP stuff, but I have seen Kerberos set up under a lot of the SMB settings. Who asked that question? Anyways, should figure. Any questions? Do you find this useful?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. You're just so damn quiet, guys.
How big is your botnet of multifunction machines?
I only have a couple. Usually, most of the stuff was developed against corporate stuff when they weren't well. The goal was, well, the next step I'm getting ready to show you was develop purely off of internal corporate printers. So I know I print tons of shit on their printers, and they were probably just who didn't know what it was before I succeeded in getting the attacks working. I'm running out of time. I want to. You can see what I did with my. There it is. Okay. Xerox word center firmware attack. This is like totally cool, but it's generated by total stupidity. This is what I'm going to show you when you realize how simple this was. You go, there's people that stupid. Yes, there are. So, the Xerox attack here is looking at a header of a firmware file. This is a DLM, dynamically loadable module, okay? So if we look at the header right here, we can see all this XRX job ticketing stuff. And there's very little published on XRX. Matter of fact, I tried to talk Xerox into giving me access to their XRX development manuals. Well, they told me, he said, Daryl, we only give those to people who sign non-disclosures, and no matter how many non-disclosures you sign, we're not giving it to you. So we have these XRX headers, and this is how firmware packages are built. The interesting thing, this is also how clone functions are built. So most of these work centers, you can go into them and you can generate a clone file. That clone file is a DLM that you can send to another printer on support and have it configure that printer to match this one. It's a way to deploy multiple printers within the environment. The thing is, though, a DLM is a DLM is a DLM, okay? Pretty straightforward. So if the printer can generate DLMs, okay, and firmwares of DLMs, what's the odds of the firmware that goes on the printer containing the code to generate the DLM firmware packages? Pretty high. Well, how do I get the firmware? Well, it's pretty easy. You can go out and you can download firmware from Xerox. And it turns out, this header, if you delete this header, just delete it out of the file, this is nothing but a tarball. It's not packed in any way, shape, or form other than a gzip. TARZIP. So just on TARP, you have the entire package and all the cool tools. So which is what I did. So interesting tools is they have this tool folder called DLM Toolkit. What do you think you can do with a DLM Toolkit? How about generate these sign packages for the DLM? So what's it contain? It contains DLM Maker, DLM Stripper. Stripper strips the header off the DLM. Okay, pretty straightforward. Key files. Yes, it gave you all the key files too. The earlier printers were synchronous, are synchronous, not asynchronous keys. Turns out the keys were dim across every known model. No different keys for different models, same keys. There's different keys for what you're trying to do, whether it's a clone, whether it's a patch, whether it's a firmware upgrade, whether it's a custom manufacturer install function or something like that. But easily we get in there, and it turned out that if you go back to 2 versions ago of their systems, all things were i386 processors. They're all now PowerPCs. I didn't have a PowerPC. I'm lazy. I wanted to emulate a PowerPC. So I just jumped back a couple of versions, found i386, found all the same tools which hadn't changed. So all the salts, all the keys were the same for every model moving forward. And believe it or not, this one actually would just run on my Ubuntu kernel. So, and if you run it without any feature, without any stuff, it'll actually give you the entire command structure. So we're able to generate our own firmware package and sign it and send it to a printer. So at that point, I downloaded a firmware package. Let's say it's just a patch, because I don't want entire firmware, just a patch, and try to figure out how to structure it. Well, it turns out that there's one core structure to it, and that is a single bootstrap file that's executed at root level that goes through the process of replacing all the files. So I built a firmware package that basically has one shell file. And that shell file does what? Reverse bash. So then I just build my package with my IP address in it, and it would immediately kick back to me a reverse shell on a Xerox printer where I had root level privileges on that device. Everyone see a demo?
Yeah. Yep.
So the thing with this whole attack So the interesting thing with this attack, so we had this little conundrum type thing, is the header contains the key, the signed key. The problem is if you alter stuff, it changes the key. So how do I build Metasploit module that will actually be able to use against any IP or any device and have it connect back and reverse shell anything you wanted it to if I can't build that into the Bootstrap program? Well, it turned out that after examining this and playing with it, it turns out there is an entry in the header comment field where you can get 512 bytes in that comment field. So what I did was, I'll show this to you in a minute, I basically found out that all the jobs, DLM jobs, when they hit the device, they go to the spooler, print spooler, just like a standard print job with standard structure with that DLM header. So I took the comment field and I put an Easter egg in there. And then I wrote my code that would execute the scan through the print spooler folder until it found that Easter egg. And then it would parse that particular line and grab the code that Metasploit put in there. In this case, it's simple bash shell, but you have control of the bash shell, giving us the ability to weaponize this without having to worry about having access to the keys inside your own package. Now, I think, and Xerox not patched none of this. They ain't changed the keys out. They know about this. I worked with them. So what you're going to see will work against all 5600s, 5700s, 7600s, 7700s, work Citras, all 9100 and 9200 series color cubes, and probably about 40 other models. The only ones this won't work on is the new devices that just came out here in the last 16 months, I believe, which was the 5800 series, 7800 series work Citras, and the 9300 series color cubes. They have some of their own problems, but that's to be discussed on another day. I think I have this memorized. They're words, not numbers. I can't remember words. Yeah, hopefully our server stays up. So then we have also show. Okay, there's two payloads you can send to this: a reverse bash shell and a generic code execution. So if you want to run a Linux command that's on the device, you have the ability to do that. So when you kick this thing off, it sometimes will fail considering the state of the printer. We were probing the printer a minute ago, so it may work. But okay, that's going to fail. So why do you think it's failing? I can tell you why it's failing. I put the wrong port in. Remember, my Jet Direct port was a different number. So set our port to 9696. And we have shell. So present working directory, you can see where we're at. This is the file that it dumps on the device and executes. So if we cat this file, we can see my code. It's really simple. So basically, the first thing it does is it goes to this folder here, which is the prints folder, and it looks for all the files that may contain freight up home 2014. That's why if your job fails, you don't want to send another one immediately. You want it to clear out the buffer. And then what it does, it gets a response back. It just parses that out, cuts the lines up, and actually passes it to command, which is the bash shell that it gets sent to. And then if we jump over here real quick, let's show this first. So if we go, so we see we're root. We can see it's a Linux box. It's a Xerox, and it's running PowerPC. It's a PowerPC processor. Let's jump over here real quick so we can show you. So we see the jobs here, and it's going to be this job. I know that. Should be the only one. There's no one's here is printing code on my printer. If he was, we would see that. So if we cat that, okay. So we're really quick. We see how the print job ended up on the device, and we see that header structure, as I mentioned. So we see our comment header right here, which is the one I have control over. And there's the Easter egg, and then there is the payload data that's punched into the job that's coming from the Metasploit module. Could we execute other code using this? Oh, there's a lot of things we could possibly do. The goal here was just to get this functioning in Metasploit, which a number of people wasn't sure was even possible because of the key signing issues and that stuff. The fact that I found a comment header. There's two comment headers. The unfortunate with the comment header, you got to be careful because the patch or the firmware version identity goes in there. So if it's not in the right place, it gets messed up, it breaks, won't work. So the first header allows us to put up to 512 bytes potentially in there, and have it still process it pretty good. And then of course, this is generally just the tarball data. And this would actually hit the printer. So if we look at the printer right now, we're running out of time. So if we come over here to jobs on the printer, we can see there's a print job in there. And you can see it's decomposing right now. This will not halt other print jobs. Other print jobs will continue coming. They're just kind of nice. I like the remote user. Yeah, the interesting thing when you hit these things with print jobs, if one of the old attacks is if you use LPD to send a print job to the thing, it would actually record your machine name. So if you use it to attack a device, they can just look in here and see who did it and in the logs. So you have to be careful with that. Any questions? So there we are. We're on a Xerox printer, and everyone has the capability of owning Xerox printers now.
So do these like get CDEs, or is there a repository database, these types of attacks?
Yeah, the standard CVE. Most of the stuff ends up in standard CVE. I don't know if this would possibly did. If you were a Xerox is always publishing advisories. This was published as advisory, but unfortunately, printer companies have a tendency to be very vague. They don't want us, no one ever patches printers. How many people here patch their printers?
We have problems with this.
Okay, well, you patch your printers, but you don't change the default passwords?
Nope.
Okay. I remember that. I didn't see any hands earlier on my question, so I was a little, well, that's good. Patching's pretty good.
Are there any competent printer manufacturers that handle things like this?
Actually, Xerox is probably one of the better ones. They take this stuff seriously. Everything here is, even though this flaw was not patched, because It was the core of the system, and it just wasn't doable. They couldn't even get it on their next version of products. They couldn't get the whole thing implemented. They gave me a list of things that they were implementing when their products were coming out. They gave me a lot of inside information. And I finally got around to looking at it and found out it was a year after this data was supposed to enter, not everything got done. It finally did get done just recently, but still it's a whole patch level. So patch these things. They publish a lot of this stuff silently. Here, let's get this slide deck back up. I want to make sure we slideshow. I want to make sure we get this discussion. Well, here's the list of predators this is vulnerable against for the firmware stuff. I guess it is in like 377, 9200. I think it's another version. But you can see every Xerox printer or etc. that use dynamical loadable modules as a functionality since the beginning of time up until the last 12 months is vulnerable. So that, 46 billion printers around the world, you can get root shell on.
So you get the root shell. Do they have the all that part of it stored somewhere?
It's all stored encrypted. I have not taken the time to try to figure out and reverse engineer the encryption. I got the printer at home, it's just a time-based thing. I know a couple of people go, oh, I'll take care of that, Daryl, and they like disappear because they realize this is not an easy endeavor if you don't have a printer sitting in your dining room, which I do now. So that may be solvable. Chances are whatever I crack, if I do get around to cracking that, will be the same data. Will be if that's the case, the cooler thing is now if you want all these creds, all you have to do is extract a clone. Because the clone's going to contain all those passwords in the encrypted format. So if I ever figure out what the encryption mechanism is, at that point all you need to do is log into the device, run a clone, explode the clone. If you guys got Xerox, go to your office, do a clone, get that DLM, strip that header out, save it on tar and take a look at it. Challenge you to do that. You'd be interested in what is all in there. It's kind of fascinating. So we do have a number of projects we're working on. One is to move my tool Prada over to Metasploit. We're creating a thing called Pradasploit 2. That's the ultimate goal. So basically all the modules, because Prada is a modular framework right now. Okay, we have all these individual modules that's written in Perl. The goal is to rewrite all those modules into Metasploit, put them in Metasploit, and then rewrite the Prada dispatcher to do the fingerprinting and then call Metasploit. So you can still automate printer scan from your corporate network. Or it goes beyond that. We also scan all embedded devices, generally, is the ultimate goal of the tool. So right now, Pareto enumerates over 103 different devices. There are device model types. You may have 20, Xeroxes in there. It does this through title page, server type, and SNMP. How's it work? Scan your network, you get, here we go, let's move on Pareto. Metasploit. The goal of moving that is obviously there's a bigger group out there using it. So it will become more valuable if the individual modules are put into Metasploit. Individuals can use it that way, or they can eventually use the Pradasploit that we're going to release theoretically sometime in the future if I actually get my head above water again. We'll rewrite that, call that to automate that process. So that'll be good. The modules we've created so far, so we have a Xerox LDAP passback attack module. So the demo I showed you for doing the passback manually, there's actually a Metasploit module to automate that for Xerox. Conic address book extraction, these have all been put in the product. Dell HP username extraction, I don't know if those have all been put in the product yet. And Xerox reverse shell has been put in the product. Yeah, this is what I was going to get to. Securing your environment. So how do we secure our environment? Start off with, if you got a RICO, change the supervisor password. No point in having any password if you leave that one unchecked. Okay, start with that. Change the password for all the defaults for all your printers in your environment. Without that, anyone can query the device and have it give up the store. Okay, it's that simple. It's not rocket science. Change the default passwords. Disable firmware upgrade. If you have Xeroxes, those Xeroxes have a place you can go to disable firmware upgrades. Okay, shut it off. When you need to do a firmware upgrade, you turn it on, do the upgrade, turn it off. Okay, it's fairly simple. You'll reduce your footprint of being attacked on your devices. Don't expose it to the internet. We have any higher education universities here? Yeah, all your printers are on the internet, okay? Change those passwords. Turn those things off. Turn a lot of stuff off. Remove it from the internet. It's that whole openness, and you're being way more openness than you really want to be. You need to be concerned with that, because literally, if these devices, and I've done work for universities where their devices are put on the internet, people can get access to for that openness, but I also pulled Active Directory credit off those devices from the internet. That gave me the ability to log into Active Directory services like OWA and VPN services and stuff like that. So definitely want to think about those exposures and limit them as much as possible, but still get the usability of the devices as possible. Also, functional isolation. This is key. This is really key in my opinion. Functional isolation. The benefit is if you have a printer that's specifically to HR, to payroll, it should be isolated so no one else in the company can get to it. There's value to that. The reason. An example. One of the engagements I did, I found a printer. The printer was called Payroll Printer. Okay, sounds interesting. The large one happened to be a Toshiba. Turned out that it was configured for scan the file functionality. So I go in there and I extract the creds out of the device. They had, so to start with, at a minimum, that account had access to everyone in Active Directory, unless you remove it from the everyone group and put it in an isolated function group. That's good. But what I was able to do was go to Active Directory, and I found out that they were actually scanning, what do you think they were scanning? The payroll department. Payroll stuff, oh yeah. So they were scanning payroll stuff, putting it in a folder. So I used that account to log onto that folder. Guess what else they were using that folder for? For doing the backups of all the financial systems for the entire corporation, which I was nice enough to steal, which gave me access to everyone's payroll, social security number, bank accounts, and everything else that had to do with their 1,400 employees. And to this day, I wish I'd had a chance to go back just to see if they actually fixed it. Unfortunately, they probably did not. Some credits, some of the guys I work with. Pete, me and Pete's been doing this, working together for like 5 or 6 years. We initially did this talk in a kind of core at ShmooCon years ago. And we just did a version of this whole thing with other stuff, because I always try to fix this thing up every time I do this talk in Paris. Mike Belton, also a co-worker, he's my boss now, but me and him worked for a number of years, and some of this pass-back attack stuff we discovered working together at CDW Corporation. Joe, who works at CDW, also I worked with him a lot of time in developing some of these ideas and concepts, and I wrote the tools, but these guys helped me build the concepts and test them, the critical, and Nate Power, another co-worker. So, have any questions? Here's contact stuff. Here is the GitHub. Moose Dojo GitHub, there's some stuff open there. Pratasploit is. So a number of those modules have made it into Metasploit, but not all of them. So there's a couple in there. Any of the new stuff that we do come up with this time will end up in that folder. So you can get that stuff and give it a try. Typically it'll be safe, it'll have been tested, so you're not like going to kill anything. But always use some common sense when you're using these tools. And like I said, there's my Twitter handle. And that's pretty much it. Any questions? You gotta have some questions. Come on. What's that?
I've seen the talk a couple times.
Well, it changes. We're always changing the whole talk. So if you see me doing this talk a year from now, it will not be the same talk. Hopefully, it'll be new stuff, new ideas, new things we're doing. The pass-back talk, the pass-back concept, you just can't get rid of it. I mean, it's so core and so simple that we can use it to attack organizations and companies and steal their data. And the big thing here is if I'm asked to be stealthy, I come into a company and I'm asked to be stealthy. Why? Don't get caught. Right here is a 50% chance. All I have to do is ask their printers, which are not going to be picked up in any IDS, IPS, for Active Directory creds. And 50% of the time, I can get that data. and now I'm in your Active Directory with a valid account. And also, another cool thing, if you set up an LDAP account, or any of those, scan the file, do not use a domain admin account. Okay? Just don't make that account not belong to everyone, okay? Strip all the rights from that account and give it the single function it's meant to have. And that way I can't get access to file systems. Because I usually pull these creds and I run them across every machine in the network to see what shares they have access to. And inevitably I find 4 or 5 machines on the network where this stupid account that was only meant to go on a printer has admin access. Now I'm into that device and I'm moving lateral. And at that point, it's only a matter of time before I have all the rights I'm ever going to need. So I guess that's pretty much it. I'll be here probably for a few more hours. I got to get home early sometime today. I'll be here for a few more hours. Please talk to me. Share me your ideas and thoughts. Thank you very much.